Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football. Mikey McCubbs is still away. It was actually his birthday this week, so say happy birthday to him in the comments. I'm joined by, as usual even, by Henry Hill. But a real treat for you, we've got Tom Underhill for you, co-founder of The First Time Finish and author of The Working Hands of a Goddess, a book about Atalanta's journey over the last few years. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for having me on, guys. Yeah, I'm good. It's temperature's come down a decent few degrees, so I can safely wear a football shirt without combusting.
And an Atalanta one as well. Very exactly.
Well, I was just saying to you off camera that I felt I had to be. I think I'll be the only person to have worn an Atalanta shirt on this show, so I felt I had to. I couldn't not do it regardless of the weather. But yeah, I'm all good. Thank you. How are you both?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good, yeah, enjoying the slightly cooler climate, as you say. Henry, how you doing? You got your gala shirt on today. Is that a Drogba on the back, maybe?
Oh, Dougie, you gave me an intro this week. How flattering of you. Thank you. Actually, it's for you, Dougie. It's Schneider. I don't know if you can see it.
Wesley Schneider, yeah.
It's from the Wesley Schneider era, which is obviously one of your doppelgangers. But yeah, when I saw on Transfermarkt today that Haris Seferovic has gone on loan to Galatasaray, I thought that has to be honoured. I mean, the big signing that's going to change the window. But yeah, no, this is literally one of the last few shirts that fits me from my sort of younger days travelling. But yeah, I'm very excited to be here again. And Tom, it's awesome to have you on. So thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo his thoughts. Wesley Schneider, I'm always a bit annoyed with Wesley Schneider, just because the sort of athlete he's turned into. But fair enough, fair enough. On TikTok recently, I've been getting the bald Andy Robertson, which personally I don't really see either. But anyway, let's get into today's show. We're going to talk about some transfers that have been completed this week, and then we are going to quiz Tom on his book and his sort of motivations behind it, what he learned about Atalanta, etc. But we're going to start with the big transfer that happened this week in Paulo Dybala, because at Ben Flied said, how do you think Dybala will do at Roma? Now, Tom, I think going into this summer, people mainly thought he was going to Inter Milan, but he's ended up in Rome. Did you see this one coming, and how do you think it's going to go?
Absolutely did not see this coming. I don't think anyone did. I think even when the Lukaku deal got announced and the Mkhitaryan one went through, I think there was still the sense that the powers that be at Inter would want that extra kind of star factor to come in, particularly seeing as Juve have strengthened with such kind of marquee names. To bring Dybala in might really level the playing field. But as well as someone else I'm sure we're going to talk about in due course, it seems like they've kind of slept on it a little bit, and like another team has swept in to take him away. It's an interesting destination. I personally always thought he would end up at Napoli. I thought I saw the way that their outgoings had gone, and that things are pretty flat around Napoli at the moment. The way their season tailed off, Mertens leaving, Insigne leaving, there's a serious kind of flatness, and you kind of worry for them a little bit. And I thought Dybala would be the perfect guy to come in, lift the place, kind of bring back a bit of, dare I say it, kind of Maradona, Argentine kind of feel. But no, Jose Mourinho's Roma have got in there, and it's going to be fascinating. It's, for me, the biggest and most impressive part is it shows what a pull Mourinho still has, even though in this country his reputation has probably never been lower. He still has the ability to attract a kind of superstar attacker, and particularly number 10s. Like he does manage to have that pull. And I mean, a front four of potentially, if he doesn't leave, Zaniolo, Dybala, Pellegrini, and Tammy Abraham. That could push them into the Champions League places. It's a huge coup for them, and I'm very, very excited to see it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Massive move for Roma, and Totti's been talking about, and they've been talking about potentially, unretiring his number 10 shirt. I will be interested to see what happens there. I mean, Henry, you've been a massive fan of this move. You're one of Mourinho's main disciples here on FD and EFD, and you're a big fan of Dybala too. What do you think he'll bring to Mourinho's side?
Oh my goodness, yeah, I was going to say, Tom, not over here is his reputation in the mud. I'm very much behind Mourinho and what he's doing. So, I mean, this is, first of all, it's actually just quite nice to see a transfer of a big star going, as he said, to a club on the up. I think it's quite nice to see that. Let's have it right. I think it's Inter Milan's fault that this has happened. I don't think this is his preference. And this reported release clause that's in there, 20 million euros, I think is a slight nod to that fact. He doesn't want to necessarily get bogged down at a club which isn't going to go to the places that he wants to be. And I completely agree with what you were saying. Napoli, if in all honesty, although they have Champions League football, if you look at their outgoings this summer, why would you want to join that project at the moment? As you said, it is very flat. Looks like Ruiz might leave as well in the midfield. So yeah, why not join a club like Roma and be part of that really exciting attack, which I'm buzzing to see. But Dybala brings so much experience, which I think is what Mourinho wants, that kind of winning feel to help a lot of the guys there who probably haven't tasted much silverware beyond that Conference League title last season. He's won 12 trophies in Turin, 5 league titles, played nearly 300 games. 500 games would be quite impressive. And he's still only 28. So yeah, I mean, a little bit injury prone at the moment, but I think the opportunity to go to Roma, a club of their stature, to be given that kind of iconic status, he's going to absolutely love it. I was in Rome a few months ago. It was amazing to see Tammy Abraham be the big star he is, with all of the posters everywhere. It's a huge name in the club shop. Pellegrini as well. Absolutely love that hometown hero. So yeah, I think it's such a good addition, because they do need a bit more firepower to support Abraham up top. I like Shomurodov. I think he's a decent substitute off the bench, but he doesn't quite have the goal scoring rate necessarily quite required at this level of football, I don't think. And if we look at Dybala, 15 goals, 6 assists in 39 games last season, 15 goal contributions. I mean, it's excellent, isn't it, really? He does burn a little bit hot and cold sometimes, but I think he was at Juventus for so long, got slightly bogged down in the politics of the club, the transition there. Maybe a fresh start, maybe an opportunity to really be the main man at a club where he's going to get the adoration he perhaps has been craving. I think it's hugely exciting for him. Huge shot numbers, big dribble numbers. I'm him and Abraham up top. I'm absolutely buzzing to see it. Loving Roma's business. I think they still haven't actually spent that much. No. I think they've sold quite a few players as well, like Paulo Lopez, etc. There's lots of little sale players that have moved on. So they do have a budget to go out and get someone. I've been reading that the Gonzalo Guedes deal at Valencia is on hold at the moment. But if they can get an attacking midfielder in there as well, and maybe a bit more defensive cover, I'm hugely excited about Roma next season. I'm going full Giallorossi for next term. You can guarantee on that.
Love it, love it. Yeah, I think they're in 23 million euros worth of net profit this summer, which is important because they did obviously spend so massively last summer. I think they had one of the biggest net spends in Europe. I think it was over £100 million. This summer, as you say, Paulo Lopez has gone, Cengiz Ünder as well, so they got nice little fees for them. But the big talking point in the next month or so is going to be, Zaniolo and his future. He's been linked with Spurs, he's been linked with Juventus. Didn't obviously have his best year last year, but he's coming off the back of not one but 2 ACL injuries. I think he only got 2 goals and 2 assists in league play. Obviously got that goal in the Conference League final, which was a nice moment for him, sealing their first trophy in 14 years. To be honest, I don't really love the fit at Spurs. I don't think they necessarily need him, especially at that price, given the fact they've already signed Richarlison. I don't think he's as good as Son or Kulusevski in that system either. So I'd potentially be a little bit wary of Zaniolo if I was Spurs. But for Juventus, if they can, strengthen another wide option, having lost Bernardeschi, with Di Maria, he's unlikely to play 38 games, etc., then it's not too bad an option for them. But I'm kind of with you guys. I think Roma probably favourites for top 4 over Napoli as it stands. I think Koulibaly's departure, that defence, he's really held it together over the last few years, and they've lost so much firepower, as you rightly pointed out as well. So a little bit worried for Napoli, but good times for Mourinho's men, who have obviously signed Zeki Celik as well, Zvilar as well, the Benfica goalkeeper, and Nemanja Matic as well, who will provide a bit of competition in midfield, although I personally wouldn't want Matic playing any more than 30 league games for sure. Let's move on to our second signing that's been completed this week, Tom, in Bremer, because this is another one that seemed like he was going to Inter Milan. He was lined up as that Skriniar replacement. Now Skriniar's future doesn't look so certain, although by the time this comes out tomorrow afternoon, on Friday afternoon, who knows, there might be further information. But Bremer to Juventus, do you think this is a signing they simply had to get done after the departure of De Ligt?
I think they certainly had to make centre-back signings, and for them to go and recruit the last season's best centre-back in Serie A kind of on the surface makes perfect sense. Whether he's the right fit or not, I'm not totally convinced. I'm a huge Bremer fan. He's the kind of exciting centre-back who Serie A seems to be producing quite a lot of in the past few seasons. He's very similar to Mera Demiral and Christian Romero, that kind of blood and thunder centre-back who will fly out from the back line, will have a bit of madness about him. And he was allowed to do that at Torino because he played in the centre of back 3 under Ivan Juric, who is the disciple of Gianpiero Gasperini, where his demands of that middle centre-back is to, if the ball goes aerial, you run out from your line and you attack it under any under no restrictions, that is your job, and you commit to your athleticism and you fly into tackles. That is your pure role. Very different to how Max Allegri is going to ask him to play at Juve, and it'll be a kind of similar transition to what we saw with Matthijs de Ligt coming in terms of he was another kind of aggressive, kind of proactive centre back, and we maybe didn't see that so much at Juve. You saw someone who was kind of second guessing himself quite a lot. He made headlines for quite a few mistakes he made, partly because I think he was probably second guessing what he was supposed to be doing as a centre back, and I think with Bremer, I worry that you might see something a bit similar, but someone who reacts off instinct, who is just, like I say, just pure aggression and athleticism. I'm not sure there's much room for that in Allegri's kind of way of playing, particularly defending in a mid-block, whereas Torino under Juric, he'd play very high line, press from back to front, very similar to how Atalanta have done. It's going to be really interesting, particularly if Bremer goes in as a first choice. I would still expect Juve to go out and get another, maybe even two centre-backs, because they are very, very light there. They've currently only got Bonucci, Bremer, and then Daniele Rugani, who is not exactly a popular option in Turin. So, yeah, very interesting. I'm not sure I like it as much as I liked the fit of him going to Inter, but yeah, it'll be very, like I say, very interesting to see whether he can step up and carry on that amazing form that we saw last season.
Okay, some scepticism there from Tom, and as you say, Bonucci, can still play those beautiful line-breaking passes, but probably didn't have his best year last year as well. They've lost their defensive rock, who's been injured for so long for the last couple of years, and Chiellini as well. Juve's defence, it's not great at the moment either, and Alexandra and Danilo being your left-back options, there's still work to be done at Juve's defence. I still think they've had a pretty positive summer with Di Maria and Pogba and Bremer. Made it the best of the scenario of losing De Ligt, etc. But yeah, it's not ideal there either. And Serie A's title race is wide open, I think. I mean, Milan, if they get their deals done, would probably go in as favourites, maybe with Inter. But yeah, Juve, I'm sure they'll have some more deals up their sleeve as we approach the end of the window. Henry, let's talk about this deal sort of from an Inter Milan perspective, because they've obviously re-signed Lukaku on loan and had to pay a fairly considerable loan fee. I think it's about 8 million euros. They paid 8 million euros in wages as well for that season. But they still need to sell that star player. And it was all set up to be Skriniar, and Bremer comes in to replace him. And now they're sort of having to start all over again. If Skriniar leaves, they'll have to sign not their first choice replacement or someone else. But it's ended up as a little bit of a mess, maybe from an Inter perspective. Do you think that's fair?
Yes, I absolutely do. I also, this Joaquin Correa, having to sign him permanently, that's I think retrospectively bringing in another big forward. They'd rather have Lukaku with maybe Dzeko as a backup. And apparently Alexis Sanchez is kind of semi-holding the club to ransom with his wages at the moment. You can imagine the sort of, I think it's about £170,000 per week wages he was earning there could have been used for a Dybala deal in a certain context. So they need to find a conclusion to move him on, because actually his numbers have been pretty good since he's been at Inter Milan, but 33 years old, they are looking to sort of rejuvenate that squad. So yes, I do think that this Lukaku deal, there is a caveat to it. It has slightly stumped their ambitions in the rest of the market. And yeah, I'm just shocked they didn't get that Bremer deal over the line sooner rather than later, because it's been rumbling on for quite a while at the moment. But I mean, there are other options out there at centre-back who they could potentially go for. We saw Fabrizio Romano reporting this week that they've opened talks to sign Milenkovic up with the Serbian sort of out of contract in 2023 from Fiorentina. He's 6'5", 24 years old, pretty good, isn't he? He's made 172 appearances at the top level. Really kind of solid passer, 90% completion rate, can play in a back four and a back five. I know you're a big fan of him, Dougie. He's a good,
do like him.
And he's very good against opposition dribblers. Evan Ndika is someone we recommended for Chelsea as someone they can maybe bring in to bolster their back line on our scout report recently. He's a bit more of just a ball-winning ball crusher there. So if they were looking for a Bremer-style player, maybe Ndika is the one they could go for. He's only got 1 year remaining on his deal at Eintracht. Although I think Eintracht would probably hold on to him for their remaining, for their Champions League campaign at least, and sort of take the hit on that. And another name I've been seeing a lot recently is the Fenerbahce defender, Kim Min-jae. He's been dubbed the South Korean Van Dijk, which I think is a hugely unhelpful nickname. However, He does have a €20 million release clause in his contract. Apparently Rennes were desperate to sign him. It looks like Premier League clubs are going in for him as well. I don't think you have that kind of release clause at a Turkish side without being sort of quality in that sense. And apparently Inter Milan are very interested in him too. He's had a lot of hype in Turkey. We've actually seen Sevilla sign Marçal out at Galatasaray for 12 million, which is a pretty big signing once again from the Turkish league. So clearly they do have some quality defenders in there. So yeah, watch out for Kim Min-jae. Maybe he could be going there. Napoli are interested in him as well as a Koulibaly replacement. So we could see another tussle on our hands for the South Korean. But yeah, watch this space. Interesting.
Yeah, Napoli also signing Leo Ostigard as well. I do feel sorry for that guy being called the South Korean Van Dijk. I just think those the Sigankov as well, the Ukrainian wingers called the Ukrainian Messi. Like, just let them be their own player. Just don't label them the best in the world in their in that position in their own country. I just don't think it's particularly helpful. But yeah, as Henry says, big fan of Milenkovic personally. It actually comes from in the height of lockdown playing far too much Football Manager on a career save with Inter Milan, and I signed him and Lisandro Martinez, and then sold Skriniar and had De Vrij, and Alphonso Davies was my left back, and we went seriously unbeaten. I mean, smashed the league. Anyway, but back in the real world, I think he's an excellent player. As you say, 1 year remaining on his contract. Maybe Fiorentina will put up a bit of a fight to keep him, given the fact they've sort of rebuilt that attack since Vlahovic's departure, with Cabral coming in. They've just signed Luka Jovic on a permanent deal as well for free, and then have a 50% sell-on clause. So they might have ambitions for top four as well under Vincenzo Italiano. I think it'll probably be a step too far. I mean, Tom, what do you make of Milenkovic? Do you think he's the sort of player that could fulfil that Skriniar role if it was demanded?
Yeah, I think he could, and I think it's probably going to become a bit of a two-way tussle for who they go for. I think Kim Min-jae is. I've seen him linked. I've also seen him linked with Napoli as well, and I could maybe see that more likely than the Inter move. But I could see it being a two-way tussle between Milenkovic and Merih Demiral from Atalanta as the kind of 30 million-ish player to come and fill that right side of centre back, and they're two very different types of centre back. Like we were saying earlier, Demiral is more of what you'd call like the dog profile centre back. Yeah. He flies out, he's aggressive. 96th percentile for centre back pressures, 4.97 tackles and interceptions per 90, which, like, for context, that's the same as Basuma's making, and he's pretty much like up there, like, among Europe for those metrics. And for that to be a centre back as well, it's pretty wild. Up 2% for centre backs for aerial duels won. He's the perfect Atalanta centre back for what Gasperini's asked of him, and that allows him to kind of impress in that way. Milenkovic is slightly different. I see him being more like what you describe as like the cat profile, in terms of he's a bit more subtle. He's very, very good on the ball. Fiorentina have a lot more of the ball than Atalanta. They're like second in Serie A for possession last season. So again, Milenkovic has the opportunity to be that passer, that expressive kind of comfortable option at centre back that you might not see from Demiral, for example. And looking at the way that Inter play, where they have Dumfries on that right side, I'm not sure whether someone like Demiral is the kind of the safest option to have in behind, because if you have a wing back going that high and that wide like Denzel Dumfries does, I think you probably want a centre back who might be a little bit more cautious on that side, who can read a long ball in behind, because that's how the opposition is going to target you. They're going to hit long balls into that vacant space. And I think Milenkovic is probably a better option than Demiral for that kind of role. Partly also because I wouldn't like to see Demiral leave Atalanta, because they've just tied him down. They've actually just signed him on a permanent, so it'd be a bit of a shame to see him leave. But both would be very good options. But I think Milenkovic could be the more Skriniar-like replacement than Demiral, for example.
I like it. There we have it. Before we move on to quizzing Tom about his book and Atalanta in general, and then answering some quick-fire questions, I want each of you to say your top 3 or 4 in Italy next year. Henry, I'm coming to you first.
Oof. I think Juventus... Oh, it's horrible to say it, isn't it? It feels horrible to say it. I think Juventus have made some really impressive signings, actually. Although it's interesting to hear the reservations about Bremer maybe fitting into that defence. But Pogba, yeah, I've got a hunch that it might go Juventus, AC Milan, Inter Milan. It does depend on the rest of AC Milan's window, because I feel like they've slightly stalled in their business. And then, I'm definitely putting Roma in fourth at least. But I can see Roma even pushing higher into third. But yes, I'll go Juventus, AC, Inter, Roma as it stands.
There we have it. Tom, what do you reckon?
I think it's going to be tight. I think we'll have another really close two-horse race. But I think it'll be between Juve and Inter. I think Milan's kind of their rumoured business is very interesting, and it's very it's quite cool to see. Like people like Japhet Tanganga linked, Ndika linked, Charles Ketelara. Really interesting, like a good scouting profile of player. But I'm not entirely sure whether that quite translates to them mounting another title charge. Like they really overperformed last season to win the title with a squad that really was nowhere near the strength of, I would even say Napoli's. I think Napoli's squad on strength was probably better than Milan's last season. So I think it'll be a stretch too far for them to come out to the title challenge. But I think it'll go Inter, Juve to just miss out, Milan, Roma, I think.
Oh, fair enough. I think I'm kind of in agreement with you about the slight Milan drop-off. I mean, it's difficult to say because we don't know how that business is going to go in the final few months. And I do really like the players they've been linked with. I think Tanganga would be a really intelligent loan move. Be a great move for him as well. I think, the opportunity to go on loan to Milan with Maldini as the technical director and, learn from and play alongside Fikayo Tomori, one of the most exciting emerging centre-backs in Europe. I think that's a great opportunity for him to sort of push himself up England reckoning as well. And, it gives Milan another option with Kayer coming back from injury and Kalulu and Tomori looking to continue that partnership. I think it'd be a really sensible signing from them. But I'm going to have to go Inter, I think. I think Juve are going to have some defensive issues, as I've already said. I think at fullback they're particularly weak. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Skriniar yet. But I do think Inter Milan probably should have won the title last year, at least by expected points. And obviously Milan turned up in big moments. They kept on winning games 2-1, 1-0, etc. Those Giroud goals, Tonali popping some in at crucial points as well. But I think if it had been played again, Inter probably would have, 8 times out of 10, I think Inter would have won that season. But it just didn't do enough in the big moments. So I'm going Inter, and then I'm going Milan, and then I'm going Juventus. But that's my thoughts on it. Guys, get your ranking for the top 3, and then I'm going Roma in 4th. Get your ranking for the top 4 in the comments down below, and let's move on to our Atalanta section. Okay, as we said at the top of the show, Tom, unlike Henry and myself and many people our age, has actually written a book, The Working Hands of a Goddess, which is all about Gianpiero Gasperini and Atalanta's journey over the last few years. First of all, Tom, I just wanted to ask you, what was your sort of motivation and what sort of really, what was the yearning to write about Atalanta and their story?
So I first really came across them in their first Europa League season, which would have been 2017-18. And I just stumbled across them, really. I was at university at the time, and I just happened to turn on the Europa League one evening because I saw that Everton were playing. I'm not an Everton fan, but that was the summer of upheaval after Lukaku and bringing loads of attacking midfielders in. And I was just kind of interested to see what was going to happen there. And I saw there against little Atalanta. And yeah, Atalanta won 3-0 at the Mapai Stadium, which is Sassuolo's stadium. And I was just completely captivated, drawn in by their attacking play, by the kind of mixture between industrious players who I'd never really heard before, kind of pulling their weight and pressing like animals, with these creative, cultural kind of like attacking midfielders and wingers, like Papu Gomez, for example. And it all just worked in kind of symbiosis perfectly. And started to watch as much as I could, read about them, write about them. And then about 18 months ago, I kind of thought that there was a lot of kind of analytics writing about them, and like people such as yourselves talking about them. And I wanted to kind of bring all together in a bit of a mixture of tactics and culture and community, as the subheading of the book goes. And I believe it's the only English written book work about Atalanta. So I'm very proud to be the custodian of that, let's say.
Absolutely, so you should be. And what was the biggest sort of takeaway you took from reading about Gasperini? Because he'd obviously had a bit of a nomadic footballing journey, at least in managerial terms, prior to taking over at Atalanta. What do you think it is about him and the fit at Atalanta that has just worked out so well?
I think it's just been a total faith from the club to put all their resources into him. You're right, he's had a very nomadic managerial life where at times he's had to kind of resist the madness above him. Look at Genoa, where there's a very unsettled managerial kind of situation, has always been. I mean, if you look across Genoa's history, he's got 2 of the top 5 longest stints as Genoa manager. He was there in 2 different spells in the space of 10 years. And he has kind of had to resist a lot of that. And then he went to Inter, which was a complete catastrophe. He was sacked after 5 games because he couldn't get Wesley Sneijder to play in a 3-4-3.
There he is again, popping up again, Wesley Sneijder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a very stubborn man, Gasperini, and you have to, if you're going to buy into him, you have to buy into him. And the guys at Atalanta have absolutely done that. I mean, they started off, his tenure at Atalanta started off terribly. Like, he only won 1 of his first 5 games, and they were a bit of a mess. He wanted to play 3-4-3, but they didn't have the personnel to do so. And in their first match against Lazio, he played 4 different fullbacks in different positions. It was just an absolute mess. And he was called to President Picassi's office, and it looked like after 5 games, again, like he was at Inter, he would be sacked. But Picassi basically put all his faith in him, and he said, like, you're my guy. I've recruited you because you're who I want to take this club forward. What do you want to do? And we'll back you. And he said, I want to play 3 at the back, and I want to utilize the academy, this amazing academy we have at Atalanta, because he'd never had that at Genoa or Palermo or Inter. He never had the chance to use it at Inter. And it's kind of strange because Gasperini is generally likes using older players. Like, he likes a player about 28 and older who is fully committed and has kind of already found themselves, and he likes to rinse an extra inch out of them. But in that first season, he had to, basically, they were in such a poor state, he had to use the kids. And those kids that season happened to be Franck Kessié, Mattia Caldara, Leonardo Spinazzola, Andrea Conti. It was an incredible batch of kids, basically. And that shot them forward. And they've never looked back. And at the start of every season, up until about 2 years ago, if you'd asked the president what the aim of that season would be, it would still be survival. Even when they got to the quarterfinal of the Champions League, that season he said that all I want is survival, and anything on top of that is a bonus. And if you hold that kind of mindset, it kind of frames everything that comes thereafter as being a miracle. And Atalanta fans see it as a miracle. They don't see it as a kind of being brought back to life, or it's their time to finally shine. They see it as an absolute nirvana that they had no right to kind of enjoy. So, last season they finished 8th, which was significantly worse than the season before. But when you look that they finished 17th as recently as 2014-15, 8th place finish in a Europa League quarter-final that would be a history-making season for them. So it really does. The whole thing of Gasperini's tenure is framed by what's come before and probably what will come after it, perhaps. But he is an absolute genius, and the club do many amazing things. Their scouting's fantastic. They have loads of pockets of scouting in Africa and different parts of Europe, and they take really unfancied players that no one would really bet on and make amazing things out of them, and that deserves a lot of credit. But really, none of this happens without Gasperini, and he's a genius manager. And I just really wanted to shed some light on the appreciation I have and people in this country should have of him, I believe.
Yeah, it is an incredible story, and it's interesting you mentioned that Everton game, because I actually lost £10 to Joe Tomlinson because of that Everton game. I remember it was a few weeks after I started at Football Daily in, I think, September 2017, and we went to the pub to watch it, and Everton got absolutely ruined by Atalanta, and Joe was like, I bet you Koeman will be sacked within 3 weeks, and he'd done quite well the season before, but as you say, just lost Lukaku, and I was like, I'll take on that bet. Of course, he was fired within 3 weeks, and that got off my betting with Joe to a bad start, which hasn't really recovered. Henry, as Tom points out, not a good year last year. A lot of their players, I mean, Tom says it perfectly there. He likes to use that players approaching 30. But maybe their recruitment last summer didn't potentially go as well as they probably hoped. And this summer there's some question marks asked, relative to the teams around them, whether they'll be able to be in that top 4 race again. I mean, how do you see Atalanta doing next year?
It's an interesting one. I think we saw Koopmeiners really just get better and better the longer he was there, and I think he is the big hope for that midfield. But you're right, it's the attackers remain fairly similar for a long time now under Gasperini. But I do like some of the business they've done this summer. I think Jeremy Boga is a good forward. Let's pick him up for 23 million euros from Sassuolo. I know there was lots of interest in him. I'm excited to see what his end product will be in a new setting. And Edison as well for 22 million again, coming in from Salernitana, sort of a huge figure really, and helping keep Salernitana in the division last year. 3 tackles for 90. I mean, yeah, he was a real standout player in their sort of epic survival last season. Then, I mean, it's interesting to hear what Tom said about Demiral in terms of whether or not he might be on the move. No sooner has he made that deal permanent at Atalanta. But yeah, I mean, they rose at a point when the sort of big guys in Serie A were slightly struggling a little bit. And I think we're going to see a bit more disparity perhaps between the top 4 or 5 and the rest of the chasing pack next season. That's the kind of hunch I'm guessing at the moment there. But I mean, yeah, it's like you said, Tom, I think context is almost everything when you have to consider where they've come from and where they're going. Because I remember seeing on the tweets the responses to what Dougie put out. I think it was Sean McKenzie saying, has Gasperini taken them as far as he can? And that's an interesting concept, really, when, like, what are their ambitions going on from here? I mean, is it just ridiculous for them to expect to be competing with these big guys? We know that they're obviously a much smaller club. They've just begun to really renovate that stadium to make it, almost bring it up to date. I think they're one of the few clubs that actually own their own stadium in Serie A, which is a real bonus. So they've got that to look forward to. I mean, Tom, in terms of taking them as far as he can, do you think that's just sort of almost silly thinking, or do you think there is an element of perhaps Atalanta start to look beyond this and think, how can we continue to rejuvenate the side? Does that come from the top?
I think any ideas of moving Gasperini on are it wouldn't happen. I don't think, even though Atalanta have had new American shareholders come in, the Paliuca family, who are the same people who were interested in buying Chelsea at one point, which is kind of really threw off a lot of Atalanta fans because they thought they would be turned into a bit of a feeder club for Chelsea. Despite having that new interest, I think it's perfectly well known that Gasperini is he's become an adopted son of Bergamo. He has the freedom of the city after 3 seasons there and getting them to the Champions League for the first time. They gave him the keys to the city. He lives in the city. He's from Piedmont, which is the region that Juventus are from, and he's a Juventus fan as a child, and he worked there for many years. But in many ways, he's almost more Bergamaschi than he is from Piedmont, because he just personifies their no-nonsense kind of work first, doesn't mince their words kind of mentality. It's very Bergamaschi. You think he was from the region. And I think they're just full of respect for what he's done. And if anything, it's more likely that he would walk away. This summer, there have been some rumblings that he called a press conference a few days into the summer where all Atalanta fans started to worry, and they thought, this is it. This is him walking. And he essentially said he's staying, but with the caveat of, I'm only staying because of how much I love the club, how much I love my team and the fans. So basically, the people above him are rubbing him out the wrong way, which is not a great way to start a season. Some of their business has been interesting. Edison's a very interesting move. They've needed cover in central midfield for a long time because Darun and Freuler are into their 30s now, and they're beloved by the club, by the fans, by Gasperini. Gasperini calls them his pilots. He said, whatever goes on in the back of the plane, they're the people who control everything. As long as they are on the pitch, everything else will be fine. And a part of the reason why they struggled last season is they didn't play together enough, because there were loads of defensive injuries. So Darun had to play at centre back, and without those two, it really disrupts the kind of the environment of the team. But then being in their 30s, and if you're going to want to progress further, you can't just you need to have some sort of succession. The first step was to get Tone Kopmainers last season, who was, like you say, Henry, he was probably one of their best players last season. I'm a huge Kopmainers fan, have been for years since he was at AZ Alkmaar. He's just a Rolls Royce of a midfielder who is so underrated and does so many brilliant things. Like at Alkmaar, the big thing was that he was a brilliant deep passer, and he could play at centre back, and he could take the ball off the centre backs and spray Xabi Alonso-esque passes at field. Whereas Atalanta last season, he was kind of playing more as like a number 10. He was kind of running beyond the striker and pulling wide, and it was really interesting to see that development of him. But long term, he will play in the pivot. But Ederson's very different again. He's a destructive kind of player. He profiles very similarly to Joe Linton and Conor Gallagher, a midfielder who doesn't have a whole lot of quality on the ball, but does a lot of pressing, does a lot of defensive work, essentially gets the ball off the centre backs and plows through forward. He makes things happen by just carrying the ball forward. Doesn't do a whole lot else. But he arrived at Salernitana in January, and you saw what happened after January. So he had a huge impact on that team. And you imagine if anyone's going to kind of refine a bit of quality out of him, it would be Gasperini. Again, Jeremy Boga, another one you mentioned, he arrived in January, looked a bit like a rabbit in headlights.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't really sure what was being asked of him. He's a player with tons of talent, amazing dribble numbers, but never really had any end products. And you kind of park that player in a quite an explosive pressing team like Atalanta under a manager like Gasperini, who will just, doesn't matter how much you arrive for, if you don't play well, he'll hook you. He looked a bit scared at times, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can take a step up, because I think they need it. They need pace, they need rejuvenation. You can't just rely on that. The core of that amazing team has started to crumble already. You can't. You have to rejuvenate with able replacements and take the team in a different direction. So I think if there's going to be any change, it will be through the personnel they bring different things, rather than it being a change in manager, because I think they owe Gasperini that much, that they would keep him for as long as he wants to be there. And knowing the club as I kind of have come to through my research, I think as long as President Percassi is there, Gasperini will be there. Whether the way around happens and Gasperini leaves, that's a different question. But yeah, that's how I suppose any change would happen.
Love it. The wily fox. They're not getting rid of him anytime soon. And yeah, I love Cop Miners as well. The best thing about him is he's a centre-back and midfielder that can take free kicks as well. It's a bit like Van Dijk at Celtic. He's just got so much quality. And I was amazed he went to Atalanta last summer. It was a real coup for them. But yeah, as you say, I don't just worry about their midfield options. It's really up front. I think Zapata and Muriel have picked up more and more injuries. Muriel was going particularly hot and cold last year. Sometimes he looked absolutely sensational. Sometimes he just sort of looked really far off it. And, both into their 30s, they've been such loyal stalwarts for Atalanta. And it's a little bit troubling. And their goal output dropped massively last year. It wasn't really... I think they scored 25 fewer. So a bit of a disaster on that front. So it'd be intriguing to see how their attack shapes up this year. We've got a question in for you, Tom, from Hecky Bang, saying Joachim Meiler hasn't really got a look in at Atalanta. Why is that? People were pretty excited about this move to Bergamo on the back of that Euros campaign. Maybe it was before the Euros campaign. I'm getting a bit confused now. But either way, he can play on either side of the defence, and it hasn't really gone as well as people expected. Why is that? Yeah,
he's a bit of an interesting one, Joachim Meiler. He's, like you say, really, you think about Atalanta being a team that played wing-backs, and around the Euros, particularly after the Euros, where you think there wouldn't be too many better wing-backs than Joachim Meiler. And you think that would just work, that would just be a perfect match, but it really hasn't. He's been a bit of a victim of circumstance, in the sense that Hans Hatterboer has declined beyond recognition, really. He had two really shocking injuries that have taken all the pace, all the explosiveness out of him physically. And then obviously Robin Gosens left as well, like in the season just gone. Even before he left, he had serious injuries, so he only played about 5 times in the season. So that means Meiler has had to kind of fill a bit on both sides, and yes, he can play on both sides, but if you're kind of chopping and changing every other, splitting your time on both wings, I don't think you see the real best of him. And Gasperini tends to kind of couple his wing backs based off kind of opposition, like kind of the opposite skill sets. So when in that first great Atalanta team he had Spinazzola on the left, who is a crossing wing back. He takes the ball to feet. He's really good in build-up plays, a beautiful cross of the ball, particularly kind of cutting in on his right foot, which is quite unusual for a wing back. And on the other side, you had Andrea Conte, who's a kind of off-the-ball explosive, would get to the back post and score from Spinazzola and Papu Gomez's crosses. That evolved into Gosens on the left, who kind of similar to Conte. But then on the right, you have Hatterborg, who's a very subtle, again, big passer, kind of more of a midfield option rather than a winger or even a wing back. And Mailer kind of does a little bit of all of it, but he doesn't have that opposite person on the other side to go and convert those crosses for him. And I think that's frustrated him, Gasperini a lot. I went to see them in March against Genoa, and it was him and Zappacosta as the two wing backs, and Gasperini changed them over about 3 times in the first half. He spent the whole 45 minutes screaming at Mailer, absolutely going for him, and eventually just took him off at half time. And with very little kind of sorrow in doing so, and it just looks like things aren't quite working right there. And pair him with a proper aggressive wing back on the other side. They're very rare. That might result in a winger being converted to play on the other side, or even changing to a back 4. But at the moment, just things aren't really working right with Mailer. And Atalanta don't have too many sellable assets. Like, it's not like in the years gone by where they usually would have one £40 million player every summer. You had Kessié, then you had Brian Cristante, then you had Gianluca Mancini. Like, pretty much every summer you'd have one big sellable asset. Atalanta don't really have that at the moment because their last season was a bit underwhelming. So if they can maybe get a bit of money for Mailer to offset what at the moment is about 60 million euros in kind of signings, which is quite unusual for Atalanta. If they can recoup a bit of that by selling Mailer, who's ultimately not one of Gasperini's trusted players at the moment, then I think they'll absolutely do it. And it's a bit of a shame, but it's just the way when you've got a manager like Gasperini who just knows what he wants and won't deviate from it.
Fair enough. Yeah, work to do for Mailer, and yeah, it's incredible when you look at the outgoings from Atalanta in the last 5-6 years. Roger Ibanez as well. Yeah, massive credit to whatever they're doing at the academy, which I'm sure you can read more about in Tom's excellent book. But if you need any more information or any more of a push to go buy that book, I mean, what more could you want? That was excellent, Tom. So great to hear some real in-depth knowledge about a specific club, I should say. Let's just wrap up the show with Josh Davis's question. He says, Luis Alberto to Sevilla for 20 million euros is surely bargain of the summer. Henry, this is a player we've been talking about for ages on Continental Club, one of our most sort of underrated stars of Europe. Do you like this potential move back to Sevilla?
I think if they get him for 20 million euros, that's unreal. I mean, I'm not surprised that he's handed in a transfer request. I think this has been rumbling on for a while. Claudio Lotito, the president, he's said he's willing to let him leave. 25 million euros, something like that. Liverpool to get a bit of a chunk off that. But yeah, I think his numbers have just been amazing since he's been there. I mean, I know he takes a lot of set pieces, which can slightly deceive the assist numbers, but I think he's been one of the most present creators in Serie A for a long time. And actually, Lazio have been, I feel like, punching above their weight in recent years as well. So yeah, I think this would be... Sevilla make an awful lot of just disappointing signings, don't they? They sort of throw a lot of money at the wall on a lot of 15, 20 million players and hope that some of them stick in certain ways. And I just think that this would be a really smart piece of business to get someone. He's not too old either. Go back to Spain. I think this is a stunning move. And also, just quickly on Joachim Mailer, I was just thinking maybe if Brighton do sell Cucurella to Man City, that could be the kind of move where I think Mailer could slot in really well in that Brighton system under Graham Potter. That's something I was a little thought as I was hearing about his tough times under Gasperini. But yes, Alberto to Sevilla, absolutely well done Sevilla for actually I like their signings this summer. I think they've been quite smart in the way they're replacing their players at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And their link with Sergio Reguilon as well, who obviously did so well on loan there a couple of years ago, really sort of shot to prominence there. I think that was during their Europa League run in 2020. He was playing particularly well. But guys, that's all we've got time for on Continental Club for this week. I hope you enjoyed our show, our discussion about transfers, our in-depth chat about Atalanta with Tom. Tom, if people want to read your no doubt wonderful book, which I haven't got round to reading myself yet, but I'm sure, I feel very inspired to go do so right now. Where can they find your book? Where can they follow you? Where can they read more of your work, etc.?
Well, first, I just wanted to thank you guys again for having me on. Like, absolute privilege to be on this esteemed European channel such as this. So thank you again. So the book comes out on Saturday, July 30th. It was supposed to come out on the 18th of July, but for global shipping reasons, as is the way, it's kind of been pushed back. So yeah, you can pre-order it now, Saturday 30th of July. You can follow me at TomD_Underhill. That's my Twitter. And I also run a football blog website with 2 other amazing writers called First Time Finish, and that's just at First Time Finish on Twitter. So yeah, that's where you can find me, and I really hope you enjoy the book.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. Classic shipping issues getting in the way, though. How annoying. But yeah, not long till it's out there, guys. Everyone get ordering that as soon as it is. Henry, if they've enjoyed this show, what would you recommend they go watch in the Football Daily universe?
Yeah, Tom, thanks so much. Absolute pleasure having you on. It's great to hear everything you've achieved so far. So yeah, keep smashing it. If you enjoyed this, go to the transfer review where actually Aubrey and I look at Nicolo Zaniolo in a bit more detail. And I don't think, I'm with you, Dukes, I don't think he should go to Spurs. I think it'd be a waste of money. Yeah, 10 yellow cards and 2 red cards last season. Nuts numbers. But yeah, go check out transfer review and see what you think.
Nice. Sounds like someone's been a bit frustrated with their performances or their body, maybe, Zaniolo. I'm not a psychologist, but that's what I would suggest. Guys, thank you very much for watching Continental Club. Please send all your congratulations and praise to Tom in the comments, and we'll catch you next week. Bye!